do want to talk about Kristaps, guys, because again, anytime you have a player as impactful as Kristaps Porzingis with the injury proneness, if that's a word, of Kristaps Porzingis, you have to talk about him. So, guys, Kristaps Porzingis, he played 11 minutes tonight. He exited the game with about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in that second quarter. He did not return. He went back to the locker room. He was listed as questionable coming out of the half. He was then downgraded to out later on in that third quarter. Abby Chin of NBC Sports Boston reported that she fears, and Drew Carter and Scal later agreed, that this was just precautionary measures coming from Boston. Obviously, that injury Kristaps Porzingis is dealing with was a bruised heel, or heel pain is how they described it. Now, guys, obviously, we know how vital Kristaps Porzingis is to the Celtics team. Do we feel, I haven't heard much, I haven't read much, I haven't seen much on Twitter about this injury. Was this precaution? Are we worried about this? Or, where are we at?
Well, considering it was against the Washington Wizards, I would definitely lean on the more precautionary side, especially when he went out of the game, we were up. That being said, a bruised heel sounds awful because where bruised heel, that's connected, that's near your Achilles. Right. That's near your Achilles. And I never want to hear things about calf tightness, which we do hear with Kristaps Porzingis a lot. That's usually the injury he deals with, calf tightness. Bruised heel now. I don't like to hear those parts of the body around the Achilles because we know that's one of the worst injuries in sports. And if a player goes out with one of those injuries, they can be out for a year and they can honestly never come back ever the same. So, of course, we want to be precautionary when it comes to Kristaps Porzingis when those type of injuries arise. Maybe if this is a bigger game, he comes back. But they even played that clip on the broadcast where he seemed to be grimacing before the game. Little odd, I will say. Just he's practicing he's practicing to go play the Washington Wizards and he's grimacing before the game. I would think that's a red flag right there. And I'm not even sure why he was out on the floor tonight if that was really the case, because recently, since he's come back from his I shouldn't say year-long injury, but 6-month-long injury from the surgery he had during the offseason, Kristaps Porzingis, from the injury he sustained during the NBA Finals. So he's played, 6 games so far. What's really shocking about these 6 games, they have rested him here a little bit, too. I'll get to that in a second. These 6 games, what's shocking is the minutes. We thought, coming back, he played 22 minutes in his return versus the Clippers. They're going to leave him around that mark, maybe 20 minutes per game. And it's not as if the Celtics don't have other bigs to go to. They have Al Horford, Luke Cornett, who we're giving the flowers to tonight. Keita's played a lot. Xavier Tillman, we thought was going to be a bigger part of this team this year, in which he simply isn't so far at this point in the season. But 4 other bigs the Celtics could really go to. So it's not as if they're lacking at that position whatsoever. And we thought, Kristaps Porzingis, he's going to be around that 20, 25-minute mark. Well, he came out, no minutes restriction whatsoever, played 22 minutes in his first game. Okay, that's fine. 25 in his second game. All right, increases it a little bit. But ever since then, 32 minutes in that third game on December 1st. Then the Celtics rested him in a back-to-back, because that December 1st, it was Cleveland, and then we played Miami. Cleveland was the bigger game, of course. We played Miami at home the next night. Sat in that game. Then we played against the Pistons. We even mentioned on that post-game show, why is Kristaps Porzingis playing 29 and a half minutes tonight? Why was Al Horford playing 30 minutes in that game when Durant and Stewart, they played under 25 minutes? The Pistons didn't have big guys out there the entirety of the game, and yet we played our older, more injury-prone bigs more minutes than the Detroit Pistons that night. So he played 29 and a half minutes that night. They rested him on the first night of the back-to-back, Milwaukee, Memphis, that back-to-back last weekend. Now, Al Horford played the first night against Milwaukee, played against Giannis, phenomenally played against Giannis defensively. And then, of course, Kristaps Porzingis came back that next night against Memphis. He plays 33 minutes that game. 33. And then 30 against the Detroit Pistons on, of course, 5 days rest. So that's great that Kristaps Porzingis was able to get that rest, but he played that game in the middle of the week last year, plays 30 minutes. And, of course, tonight he plays 11 minutes, was 5 of 6, 1 of 2 from the floor, 11 points. So he definitely contributed a lot to the Celtics team early in the game. But after he was injured, limped to the bench, was holding his foot, Went off to the locker room. We got he's questionable to return. Well, he didn't return at the beginning of the third quarter, so we kind of knew it then. If you go out 3 minutes before half, you go into halftime. Really, that's a 20, 25-minute stretch where you're in the locker room and you don't come out at halftime and you're still questionable to return. Most likely, you're not coming back to the game whatsoever. I would like to think this is precautionary because, of course, we were playing the Washington Wizards. But I have to admit, what the Celtics have been doing with Kristaps Porzingis, yes, they've rested him on the second night of a back-to-back, so first night of a back-to-back, and that's all fine and good. They'll continuously do that throughout the rest of the season. But the amount of minutes Kristaps Porzingis is playing upon his injury of 6 months, where he had surgery on his ankle after the NBA Finals, was missed 6 months of the year, all the way up until the beginning of December. Came back. We thought 20, 25 minutes. It's been upwards of really 30 minutes every game he's playing, and I don't know if that's necessarily safe or productive for the Celtics in the long run because we have other bigs to go to. Luke Cornett dominated this game. Keita came in. We can talk about him later if we want to. He's been kind of up and down, up and down, up and down. But the Celtics undoubtedly have options. Now, Horford was out tonight, but they have options on this team. And to play Kristaps Porzingis so heavily right now in the season doesn't seem all that productive when we are going to need his production later on in the season, specifically the playoffs, where he didn't even play last year. He didn't play most of the playoffs last year, but we saw when he came into the finals, we dominated the Mavericks with him. And that's the difference between the Celtics being a great team and an all-time great team is really Kristaps Porzingis and his presence. He is our Kevin Durant in a sense.
Right. Well, and you know what's funny too about that is I won't lie. It feels like stuff is popping up with him when he's playing. He's limping. He's, catches his, lands the wrong way or falls on the floor the wrong. Like it feels like there's been a couple scares. Maybe we're just, scared Celtics fans that this guy's going to go down and be out. Right. Maybe that's just us, but it kind of feels like there's been 2 or 3 times already this year where he's gone back to the locker room to get looked at, or he's, exited the game in a limping fashion, or there's just kind of this concern surrounding Porzingis. So I don't know what you think, Randy. I do like that point. I think there needs to be some more, organization with how they're handling Kristaps, right? Cap him at 25.
No, honestly, kind of just going off what Seamus said, I want to say no, but at this point in time, I cannot say that I'm not at least a little bit worried. I mean, if he went into the locker room and came back and we had him at just play a couple minutes and then just play it safe, I'd be like, all right, he's good. We're just keeping him rested, whatever. But I mean, the fact he didn't come out of the locker room and then obviously ultimately he got ruled out. It is a little bit scary. We were told by Abby, like you were saying, he was smiling going into the locker room. Don't think he'd be doing that if he was in that much pain. But yeah, as a Celtics fan, you don't want to see it because, like you said, Seamus, he is our Kevin Durant, and I don't know if we can win another championship at least without him having some productivity in the playoffs and ultimately in the finals.
Well, and you know what? I'm going to hop in here because, it's such a unique and interesting concept that as Celtics fans, that's the thought, because I don't think that's fair to this team. Because quite frankly, with or without Kristaps Porzingis, these guys are the favorites. If Porzingis isn't there, right, I still like our chances. If he is there, we're the overwhelming, no doubt favorites to win the NBA championship, right? But if Boston struggled last postseason, right, and they played in a couple game sevens and they blew a couple leads and their execution down the stretch wasn't very good, you'd sit here and you'd think, oh God, like, can they get it done without Kristaps? And this is to no discredit of Kristaps, but it kind of feels like if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are active in we got some of the other guys, they're going to be right there, right? They're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals playing in at least a game 7 to go to the NBA Finals. And 100%. I do think, like, as important and as Celtics fans, we look and like, okay, Kristaps, like, you want him healthy, you need him healthy, right? But I think that whole phrase, you need Kristaps Porzingis healthy, is kind of counterintuitive now, considering the fact that Boston just came off of one of the most dominant historic playoff runs. I don't care who was playing. It's the playoffs, and the Celtics did it. without Kristaps Porzingis, right? Mind you, there are a couple
Yeah.
more questions. Can they do it again due to the aging of Drew Holiday and Al Horford, two players who played pivotal roles in that finals run? But I don't know about you guys, but if Kristaps not on the floor, I think it gets more competitive. But I'm still going with Green. I'm still picking the C's. I mean, what I saw last season, they were still dominant without that guy on the floor. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I 100% agree with that. And I think without Kristaps, there is still a very good chance that we will be the favorite and we could win.
Right.
But that being said, it's do I think Al Horford, Neemias Queta, and Luke Cornett can compete with Karl Anthony Towns or Nikola Jokic in 7 games and possibly 14 days.
Right.
And as much as a Celtics fan, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, easy, right? You know,
Right.
homer. I'm a homer. I wanna see the Celtics win. I'm like, yep, they're easily doing that, right? The reality of it is, can they really? I don't know. I mean, you talk about all-time great centers. You think Nikola Jokic, you think Karl Anthony Towns, whatever. But can guys like Luke Cornett, Al Horford, and Neemias Queta, can they stop them in a 7-game series when you need to win 4 games?
Right.
And that's where I really just, I don't want to say I'm worried, but it just makes me a little bit skeptical if Porzingis isn't available for all 7 games. That I mean, ultimately, it's going to put them at a disadvantage. But that's where I kind of get a little bit worried.
So that's really the difference that Kristaps Porzingis brings, though, is where yes, he's going to be going up against all of these all-time great centers, as you said, Randy, but also he shortens the margin of error for the Celtics, or expands it rather. It expands it, shortens it for other teams, expands it for the Celtics, because the Celtics are still a great team without Kristaps Porzingis. We saw it in last year's playoff run. Again, Rob, you said it, no matter who we played, does not matter who was injured, who was in, who was out. Be healthy. You play who you play. You go who you go through. And ultimately, the Celtics were just dominant in that playoff run the entire way through. And the only games we lost was, we let off our foot. We let our foot off the pedal here or there. And really, those games, we had we had a lead in that Cavaliers game, game 2. Game 2 against the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat outplayed us. What's the word here? They had more effort than us. But without getting too deep into that playoff run, I completely agree that the Celtics are a great team without Kristaps Porzingis, but he expands the margin of error for the Celtics and makes them beyond an all-time great team. This is where I compare him to Kevin Durant with the Warriors, because now Kristaps Porzingis, Kristaps Porzingis isn't Kevin Durant. Okay, Kevin Durant, he was really the best player in the NBA at the last like 3-4 years of the 2010. Now LeBron was up there as well, but going up against LeBron in the finals, of course he had better teammates, but he was outplaying LeBron James in the NBA finals, and a lot of people agreed that Kevin Durant, he is the best player on the planet as of that moment. 2017, 2018, and even 2019. We saw the Warriors went out in 2019, couldn't beat the Raptors. Klay Thompson, of course, was out in that series as well. But those Warriors teams were so dominant because of the overwhelming force of Kevin Durant on those squads. The Celtics, they can be the 15-16 Warriors without Kevin Durant and be at that level of basketball. 15-16 Warriors won 73 games without Kevin Durant and were completely awesome with Harrison Barnes starting at small forward. That's kind of where the Celtics are with Kristaps Porzingis, where if he's not on the roster, we can go and win 60 games. We can make it through the playoffs and win a championship with Al Horford starting, or with Luke Cornett filling in, Tillman filling in, Queta filling in. We can do that. But Kristaps Porzingis, this is where I compare him to Kevin Durant. He makes us such a dominant force to the point where it's undeniable. The Celtics are going to win the championship, because 17 and 18, the Warriors were undeniable, absolutely undeniable. Yet their 16 run. Now, yes, they won 73 games, but they had a bunch of problems in the playoffs. Now, the Celtics haven't reached that level yet, but we don't ever want to see that where, this player's out, or specifically we're talking about Porzingis. Porzingis is out. We're facing a really good big squad. Like, say you play the Orlando Magic, Goga Bitadze. I know, Goga Bitadze. He's playing solid right now as their
No
guy.
Goga hate.
Right, right. And Wendell Carter is out there too. Those are two bigs that they can rely on, of course. And you go down the list, Karl Anthony Towns, Randy, you already mentioned it. If you see
Yep.
Nikola Jokic in the finals, which I'm a little confused. Scal said Nikola Jokic is the Celtics, like they have to fear him the most, or whoever's on his team. I don't see the Nuggets making the finals this year out of the West.
I don't
Now,
think
will they?
they're
Well,
even
that's
making the semifinals.
we'll see. We'll see. Nikola Jokic, all-time great player. Sometimes those all-time great players can really push a team further than we expect. Like we saw Luka Doncic last year. All-time great player, probably pushed the Mavericks a little bit farther than what they really were last year.
I was on that.
Yeah, see? And
Yeah.
Nikola Jokic, if we do face him in the finals, we're going to want a guy like Kristaps Porzingis
Right.
to face all of these other bigs, because I really do think even last year, and I again, we play who we play, and that's just what it is. But I think this year's road to the finals, because the Celtics have a target on their back, potentially Al Horford, Drew Holiday, they're taking a little bit of a
Slower.
step back because of their age, and also just the competition on the landscape of the NBA and the injury luck the Celtics did receive last year. This year's path is going to be tough. It's going to
It
be
is.
tougher than
It
last year, and I think Kristaps Porzingis, having him in the lineup, it puts that margin of error at an expanded rate for the Celtics and to a lower rate for other teams. And that's what the Celtics really need when we talk about needing Kristaps Porzingis. It's not necessarily a need in sense of, oh, we need him to win games, because for some teams their players go out and they can't even win a game at all. Like you see the Phoenix Suns, Kevin Durant went out. They can't win games at all. Yet the
Right.
Celtics, they can win games without Kristaps Porzingis. It's just, are we going to be undeniable, or are we just going to be great?
Right.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. But I think the narrative that's been, and this is probably for good, but the narrative around the Celtics team is about the team, right? There's no individual player. And yes, Jason Tatum gets talked about a lot, and Jaylen Brown is obviously the finals MVP, right? There's a lot of guys that are talked about, but the Celtics are unique because they're looked at genuinely as a powerhouse of a team, right? You know, when you talk about the Bucks in their ring, it's like Giannis and Jokic with the Nuggets, and the Celtics are looked at as a cohesive team, and that's a good thing. However, I think in the process of that narrative that's driven, not saying it's wrong, is people forget to lose sight on and forget about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And that is, I think, my whole focus on the whole Kristaps Porzingis idea is that, listen, you potentially have Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan 2.0. Like, you talk about a frame, play style, two wings that can score 40 points and lock down the other team's best player. That's what you're looking at with Scottie and Jordan, right? It's like, I'm not saying they're going to be the best player of all time with Jordan, but it's like, that's what they bring. And I think it's so easy when you look at the Celtics team, when you look about Pritchard's play now, and the emergence of Derek White we saw last year, and Drew Holiday, and the ultimate unicorn and Kristaps. It's like, oh my God, this team is so good. This team. It's like, absolutely, I love it, right? But it's like, guess what? Unfortunately, you're dealing with two top 10 players as well, no matter anyone else on their team, right? And I think that is like, yes, what makes Boston so special? It's the team, it's this. But people forget the Celtics right now have the league's best duo. They have arguably one of the best player in the NBA. They have the reigning finals MVP, like probably the best two-way wing in the NBA in Jaylen Brown. Like, those two guys are legit. And I don't want people to lose sight of that. And I don't think they will, but it's like, you know, that's where I'm at right now, where it's like, listen, as long as we got those two, it's the Celtics. But aside from the fact, no, I don't disagree with you at all. I don't disagree with you one bit, Seamus. The Kristaps Porzingis is this team's KD. There's no doubt about that. There's no. And
Well, it's like
I'll never
literally
argue
we
on
have
that.
like Clay and Curry. It's like, oh, if the Warriors had Clay and Curry,
Right.
it's like they're gonna be fine. But it's like, oh, you add in Kevin Durant. This is
right.
a whole nother level.
right.
It's like same thing with Porzingis. Like when he came back against the Clippers, we're sitting there going,
Oh,
like this guy was on the bench for the first 17 games. Like, why are we
Yeah.
even talking about the team for the
Right.
first 17 games? Like,
Right.
this team is going to look completely different if he's out there and healthy. And I do agree with your point though about Tatum and Brown being, as long as we have those guys, the Celtics are going to have a chance. regardless. And
Right.
really, if either of those two guys go out, that's when we really start
Right.
have to have the conversation of like, can this team go 4 rounds
even with
without one of
Porzingis
those?
in, even with Porzingis in, I
Yeah.
think that's my point that I get to. It's like as a Celtics fan, and I consider myself an unbiased Celtics fan. Some people might disagree with me, but I like to consider myself one. I think that's where, as a Celtics fan, you need to sit back and think to yourself, all right, as long as the Jays are there, I like our odds. I think that's where this team should be at, and then you go from there. But even if like that's where it goes for me.
Yeah, kind of just going off that route a little bit. I mean, when you have a team so built like the Boston Celtics, and this is going to be a crazy statement, but you have a team with the 6th man of the year, the most improved player, the probably the 2025 MVP. You have Jaylen Brown, who arguably would be a defensive player of the year. I know he's probably not going to get it, but he has defensive player. Like, I've always praised his defense. I know
we'll go first team all NBA. We'll go first team all defense.
All right,
we'll put it there. We're not going to go as far as defensive player of the year.
Yeah, but you have
always give it to big guys unless it's some Marcus Smart narrative.
And then you have Joe Mazzulla, who arguably also could be coach of the year. You have basically all 5 starters and your coach getting NBA accolades. So it's like, when you have a team like that, and Kristaps is really the only one who probably won't get an accolade, that's insane to think about. I mean, we are praising Kristaps, but in reality, he is probably the only starter that won't get an accolade this year, which is crazy. I mean,
right. Well, and again, I think that is such an interesting dynamic with the Celtics team, because they're not covered. And again, maybe 5 years removed from this situation, this team is going to be looked at in an entirely different manner. However, like, again, when you talk about those Warriors teams, it's like, oh yeah, like Durant, Curry, right? You don't even really think about Clay and Draymond, right? It's like, oh yeah, Durant and Curry. And I think the interesting dynamic with the Celtics team is that it's looked at genuinely, wholeheartedly as a team. It's the Boston Celtics. I mean, you really, you mention everybody in their contributions when you talk about the Celtics. And I really think that narrative and that like way to look at an NBA team and that approach of a potential dynasty is very unique. And I don't know if you've seen that in the sport of basketball, because it's very, very star driven.
Yeah, like you said. I mean, you look at the Warriors dynasty, and you're right. You think KD, Steph Curry,
right? And again, maybe it's different 5 years removed.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously we know Draymond contributed huge, and Klay Thompson, Splash Brother. But when you think of that dynasty, you just think KD and Steph. And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
Right.
Like dead serious, Brad Stevens constructed arguably one of the greatest teams ever in the NBA. So I don't know. They think of the dynasty of Curry and Kevin Durant. I think of this dynasty of Joe Mazzulla, Brad Stevens, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Luke Kornet, the whole roster.
Right.
The whole roster.
No, there's no doubt about that.